For the first time, there is possibly, maybe, sort of, some movement on the Bradley Beal front. Reports surfaced over the weekend from Bleacher Report's Jake Fisher that Beal is mulling his future with the Washington Wizards, the team he has spent his entire career with up to this point. After additional reporting from The Athletic's Shams Charania and Wizards beat writer for The Athletic Fred Katz, it seems like Beal is legitimately thinking this over, and a decision could come as soon as before the draft on Thursday. Beal has been steadfast in wanting to carve out a legacy with Washington, and he has been serious about those thoughts. The man is entrenched in the DC community, likes the people in the organization, and truly wants to remain loyal and build winning for the team that drafted him. But Beal will be an unrestricted free agent in the summer of 2022 once he turns down his player option for the 22-23 season. He will be 29 years old, and the Wizards are nowhere close to contending at a serious level. Beal is a top-flight player, and other teams will be circling the wagons because it appears that an inflection point could be coming shortly. If Beal decides that moving on from the Washington Wizards before this season starts is the best move for his career, well, he instantly becomes the top player on the market, barring Damian Lillard requesting a trade and the Portland Trailblazers dumpster fire situation continuing to crumble even further. So I think it's important to give a little refresher on just how good Bradley Beal is, even though he has been on a team that's really been out of the picture in terms of Eastern Conference contention for the last few seasons. Beal has set his career high for points per game in back-to-back seasons, coming in second in terms of league leaders in scoring. He has continued to morph into an on-ball destroyer of worlds, especially since the 2017-18 season when he really started making the transformation from becoming, an off-ball player that can attack off the dribble and, was getting better in terms of handling the ball. But when John Wall only played 41 games and had a bunch of injuries in the 2017-18 season, that's when Bradley Beal started taking more responsibility on the ball, becoming a little bit more of a playmaker. And actually, it's really been beneficial for his development because now he is just one of the best players in the league, point blank, period. But unfortunately, with John Wall's continued injuries and then missing the entire 2019-20 season and then being shipped out to Houston, it's really been the Bradley Beal show. He did get help from, Russell Westbrook, obviously, in the trade this past season. But it's really just been the Bradley Beal show, just strictly speaking, in the 2018-19 season and the 2019-2020 season, where the Wizards missed the playoffs back-to-back years. But we have seen Bradley Beal in a winning context, and I think with the Wizards just being absent from the playoff picture the last few years and or getting eliminated in the first round as an 8th seed, it's kind of put Bradley Beal under the radar in terms of how good he is, because we have seen Bradley Beal in a winning context when you have a team that is not perfect. It wasn't perfectly put around him, but he did have a point guard who was a pass-first point guard, and Beal came into the NBA from college as a off-ball player. And so the perfect fit was there in terms of the backcourt. And then you had vets, you had a center in terms of Marcin Gortat who could roll to the basket, even though he's out of the league now. But I'm just talking strictly earlier, when we remember those early Wizards teams when they were on the rise, where they made it to 3 Eastern Conference semifinals 3 out of the 4 years. And really, the peak of that Wizards run was when they went 49-33 and lost in 7 to Boston. In that, that was actually a really underrated series. But anyway, don't want to digress too much. But we have seen Bradley Beal in a winning context, and I think because of these last 4 seasons, people have either just dismissed Bradley Beal or have now put him into the category of good stats, bad team guy, which is just a term that I will never, ever understand, especially when the label is slapped on a player as good as Bradley Beal is. You don't just score 30 points per game back-to-back years, set the career high again in your career points per game average, and not be a good player. I mean, if anybody can do it, anybody could do it. Like, that's literally why Bradley Beal is one of the best players in the league. if you put Bradley Beal back in a winning context on a team with players that fit around him, I guarantee you, one, you'll not only see his efficiency jump up, two, you will see that he can contribute to winning in a meaningful way. I mean, he did it earlier in his career. I mean, the numbers bear it out too. If you look at Bradley Beal's three-point shooting percentages the last three seasons, it's been 35% and below, and that is not indicative of the shooter that he has shown in his career and was touted for coming out of Florida in college. And I think him taking more of an on-ball responsibility kind of ties into that. I have some three-point shooting numbers, as you can see up on the screen. Just look at his catch-and-shoot numbers compared to his pull-up numbers, and look at the frequency or how often he takes these type of shots, and look at the frequency throughout his career. It really, look around the 2017-18 season that I mentioned earlier when John Wall started getting hurt. You'll see that Bradley Beal started taking different types of shots, different types of three-pointers. He started taking more mid-rangers and started attacking the rim more, which he is really, 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 really good at that, by the way. Look at the cleaning the glass numbers here as well. But you can see that he is still not adjusting to becoming an on-ball player because he's already fucking amazing at it. But you can see that his three-point percentage has taken a dip, and he needs to work on his pull-up three-pointer, no doubt about it. But I also think his efficiency in terms of the pull-up three-pointer would go up because he's taking less of them, because he wouldn't have to take on the scoring responsibility all the time and sometimes you have to take bad shots. And if he was on a team where he had a little bit more help in that department, then you will see his efficiency go back up to his normal shooting numbers. Bradley Beal is a dynamite player, and any team would be lucky, incredibly lucky to have him. Also because he is 28 and is smack dab in the middle of his physical prime. So now if you want to talk about teams who could be in it for the Bradley Beal sweepstakes, well, Jake Fisher in his report from Bleacher Report over the weekend indicated that Miami, of course, Philadelphia, no-brainer. Boston also makes sense because of his relationship with Jason Tatum. And the Golden State Warriors are all appearing to be in the sweepstakes for Bradley Beal should he make a decision on his future this week, of course. Fred Katz also reported that the Hawks could be in the mix, which, I mean, with the run that the Hawks had, I would imagine that their profile in terms of reputation would have risen up around the league after the playoff run they had, and has definitely caught the ears of future free agents, considering that they have a star player in Trae Young, they have a roster that makes sense around Trae Young, and they have a bunch of movable contracts considering a lot of their players are on rookie deals. These are all obviously good choices for Bradley Beal, although I do question whether... I don't think Boston fans want to give up Jaylen Brown. I personally wouldn't give up Jaylen Brown, and I know what the reaction is going to be. Oh, you do anything you can to get Bradley Beal. After everything you just said earlier, you wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown for a Bradley Beal. Well, in this case, one, Celtics fans wouldn't want to trade Jaylen Brown, and also I wouldn't want to trade Jaylen Brown because the guy is still, 24 years old, and he has literally gotten better every single year. Became an all-star this year. I highlighted in one of my earlier videos this season where I was doing a playthrough on NBA Street talking about breakout players. Jaylen Brown was one of them. I mean, the guy averaged nearly 25 points per game, has improved his three-point percentage again, shot nearly 40%, and it was on pull-ups, on every type of variety of three. And of course, he's still a good rebounder. He's a really good on-ball defender, though his off-ball defense does need work. He is still 24 and improving. And the fact that you have two young wings in terms of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown locked up for the next however many years, that is just a really good foundation to build around. And the Celtics don't have many assets left because their draft picks from the infamous Nets Kevin Garnett deal has one, they have drafted poorly with those picks, and two, have kind of wasted some of the assets away. They really don't have the draft capital that they used to have to swing for a move like a Bradley Beal, so they would have to give up Jaylen Brown in that deal, and I'm not so sure that the Celtics would be willing to do that. If you look at the Miami Heat, I don't know if it's a bid at this point, but it seems like they don't want to include Tyler Hero in any trade talks. I don't know what the details are, or I haven't seen any reporting on if they would be willing to include Tyler Hero in a potential Bradley Beal trade, but I did see a report today that they wouldn't be willing to include Tyler Hero in a potential sign and trade with unrestricted free agent Kyle Lowry. I know they didn't want to include Hero in a potential Harden deal earlier in the season. Well, I don't know that, but that was also reports about that as well. And also, I still like Tyler Hero. I think his playoff bubble raised his value, inflated his value in a really just fast way that made me uncomfortable with how people were talking about him as being a potential all-star. But now I think it's kind of underrated his value now because he did not have the follow-up season that people expected. But also, we do this every year. Players who are like 20, 21 years old, progression is never linear. It hardly ever is linear, unless you're literally Jaylen Brown, like I mentioned earlier. You're going to have some down years. And so Tyler Hero had a down year, but I'm still really like him as a player, but he should definitely be included in a potential Bradley Beal trade if that's the case. But I know they have limited draft capital as well because they traded away picks. And also, I believe they are over the cap right now, especially with the contracts they have tied to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Don't know if an expiring Goran Dragic deal or an Andre Iguodala would move the needle for the Wizards in a Bradley Beal trade, because I imagine once you trade Bradley Beal, the cart has kind of left the station and you want to build young at that point. And I really don't know if a Tyler Hero or a Precious Achiuwa would really move the needle if they were moved in a potential deal as well. Of course, my Philadelphia 76ers, I'm sure the Sixers are going to be linked to every single guard that could shoot off the dribble because, like I've said before many times on this channel, the Sixers haven't had a guard that could shoot off the dribble really since Lou Williams and Drew Holiday, when Drew Holiday was a considerably younger player. Shout out to NBA champion Drew Holiday. But the Sixers are probably going to be linked to every single guard that could shoot. Don't know how interested the Wizards would be in a potential deal that revolved around Beal and Ben Simmons, but maybe a 3-team trade would work with, say, the Wizards, the Timberwolves, and the Sixers, and maybe the Timberwolves would be the one that would get Simmons, while the Wizards also get some of the Sixers' young players and draft capital from both teams to kind of, achieve their goal of resetting the table and restacking the deck after you trade away your franchise cornerstone that you've had for so long. The Warriors are an interesting one, and they actually, I don't know if dark horse is the right word, but they could certainly be a favorite to land Bradley Beal if he did request a trade, because the Warriors do have some draft capital. They could offer Wiseman, they could offer Andrew Wiggins as well to match salary, and they could trade away the 7th and the 14th pick if Beal were to make a decision before the draft on Thursday. And that's kind of what this all hinges on, because once you use those picks, it's kind of like driving a car off the lot. The value of the car instantly drops the minute you drive it off the lot, right? And that kind of applies with draft picks. If Beal were to make a decision after the draft, then those rookie players that were drafted with those picks, it becomes less valuable. And I know that offer doesn't sound appealing to the Wizards, but with the teams that Beal wants to go to, where he wants to contend and win, those type of teams usually don't have the best cap situation. They have, or not, I wouldn't say the best cap situation, but usually they have their cap space tied up with good players, the players that make the team good, and they also don't have really much use for draft picks because they are usually drafting in the later rounds. But the Warriors are in a situation where Klay Thompson is coming back. Draymond Green proved that he is still one of the best defenders in the NBA, finishing top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting. And Steph Curry can still play at a MVP level and looks like he can sustain that well into his career and finishing top 3 in MVP voting as well. But the Warriors have a lottery pick. They have 2 lottery picks, actually, one in the late lottery, but they have a 7th pick, which is pretty smack dab in the lottery. And they have the 14th pick. And they still have James Wiseman, who I haven't given up on. I think he's going to be a really good player, especially once he finds his role. That could be a potential deal for the Wizards. I know that's been thrown around a lot by reporters. And if the Wizards don't like that deal, they can the Warriors can kind of just go, all right, well, find a better offer then. And they could sit on their hands and wait. And they will probably be there waiting for the Wizards to come back to take that offer eventually, because that might be the best package asset-wise, unless Daryl Morey can pull off a 3-team deal, because I don't think a trade between the Wizards and the Sixers straight up would get a Bradley Beal to Philadelphia move done. But I do think the Warriors and the Wizards, if Bradley Beal decided that Washington is no longer in his cards for the future, would be the 2 teams that would be the favorites to land Bradley Beal. I think the Heat, they don't have enough to get Beal. I don't think the Celtics would be willing to part with Jaylen Brown, and I also don't think Celtics fans want to part with Jaylen Brown, so even if Jaylen Brown did get traded, there would probably be a riot in Boston. And the Hawks, that one, I mean, it could work. The Hawks could definitely, they have, like I said, they have the rookie contracts, they have picks, and they could definitely maneuver and find a way to get Beal on the team. It's just that, I wouldn't even question the fit, because they would fit together really nicely. I would just wonder, they would have so many ball handlers. You'd probably have to move Bogdanovic too, and maybe some other young established players. But the Hawks could be a dark horse as well. But I think right now, in terms of teams that are ready to contend or are just one piece away from contending, I would say the Sixers and the Warriors would probably be the favorites to land Bradley Beal if he requested a trade from the Wizards.